Good morning. My name is Todd Bodeslaw, and I am a senior applications developer with Proplanner. Today, I'd like to introduce you to our new library module inside of Assembly Planner called Virtual Build, as you can see highlighted on the left-hand side of my screen. Before that, I would just like to step down how our process data inside of assembly planner is defined as it'll serve as a background to our session today. Process data inside of assembly planner is combined of routing, operation, and activity level information. Now this is the core. As you can see, there's much more data that can go into defining your process. But at its basic core, we start with a routing. Now think of a routing, for instance, as an assembly line inside your manufacturing plant. Now, inside of the assembly line, you may have workstations or operations. You can see a list of operations here on my screen in the grid. Double clicking on one operation will take you right to the operations library. Same principle here. Inside of the operations library, you can see a list of activities. Think of the list of activities that may have to be performed for this particular operation, or for instance, a workstation within inside that assembly line. Clicking on an activity takes you into the detailed information about that particular activity or task. As you can see, we have many tabs that help define that particular activity. We have the media tab selected in this case. This would be for your images and video, for instance. And we have other corresponding tabs. With that background, what I would like to do now is step into our virtual build module in more detail. With what our virtual build module is geared to do is combine our process data with a 3D model to help the engineer in either further definition or reviewing the process work that they have done to date. Virtual build will start with a workspace. Here you can see me highlighting the button in the upper left-hand corner. Clicking that button brings up the Workspace Manager. A workspace will help combine or define which process data that you want to use in combination with the 3D model. You can see that there's a lot of features here, but we'll present a list of available workspaces to you. You can have many, and all of the columns are sortable. We can open up an existing one. We can edit a existing workspace, or we can define a new one. In my case, I am going to edit this existing one, as the forms for defining a new one or an existing one are essentially the same. But just to give you an idea what goes into defining a workspace, we'll start with one I have predefined. I'm in edit mode, but we provide a unique workspace name. We can provide a routing ID, which is required. Which process do we want to use? We can search from our available routings that are already defined inside of Assembly Planner, highlight one and click OK. And then we come down to converted CAD file format. This is the format of the converted CAD that we would like to use in conjunction with this workspace. Keyword being converted. Assembly Planner will accept many different native CAD formats, such as Creo Parametric, CATIA V5, SolidWorks, even neutral formats such as STEP. But what happens is we have a file manager service that will run in the background to automatically convert those native CAD formats to a more lightweight format to be used inside of Assembly Planner. The idea there is to keep that conversion service transparent to the end user engineer. Inside the converted CAD file format, there are two choices. One, as you can see, being PRC, and that is our default, and one being HSF. The difference between the two is PRC will give higher level of quality with a little more detail. HSF is geared to be ultra lightweight, so you get increased speed and performance at the sacrifice of some quality. In the base CAD drop-down menu, we can choose from one of many different converted CAD files that we have defined available for Assembly Planner. That was automatically converted by the conversion service. The base CAD file will serve as the focal point for the workspace. So it is the model from which other actions will take place around it. As you can see, we have the ability to optionally add additional CAD files. So here a user can go and select one-to-many CAD files, and that will serve many different purposes. For instance, you may want some reference geometry to complement your base file, or you may also want to compare two different revs of a particular model. You can do that here, and then one will get laid on top of the other. With that, the user will click Save Workspace, and the workspace is then defined. Coming back into the Workspace Manager, we double-click or hit the Open button, and this will load our workspace. We'll do a little navigation as to where we are and how this is laid out, and then we'll jump in to demonstrating some of the features. Along the left-hand side, we have information about our process, starting with routing and the operations and subsequent activities down below it. The other tab on this tree is the CAD model tree, a listing of all of your different parts. You can highlight different parts, and it will highlight them on the model, and you can right-click and take different actions, and we'll get into more detail in that as I go. Along the top, you will see a grid of consumption, or a consumption grid, which is the parts that have been mapped to be installed at that particular activity. As you can see, when I click down the process, that list of parts is changing. This area speaks for itself. It's our 3D model, okay? And it has all the features that you would have come to expect in other CAD viewers. Now, note that all of these different grids, like our process tree and our consumption grid, acts exactly the same as other parts of our software, where you can right-click and you can customize the view, where you can add and subtract any number of fields that you wish. That holds true for both the process tree and consumption grid. Okay, so what I'd like to do is step across the main features, highlighting some more than others, and then come across the different tabs, giving highlights to that. And then I would like to conclude with showing the different application modes in which you could use this particular module. There will be 4 of them, which I will introduce you to. Right. Opening and creating a workspace we have just discussed. The refresh button will give the user the opportunity to refresh different parts of their session. The default is just refreshing the 3D viewer. We can refresh all of just the process data along the left-hand side, or we can do a full, almost reload of the entire workspace. Now, we have a feature of being able to edit some of the basic consumption data inside of this grid up here. And in default mode, which we are in, we are going to use this edit consumption feature. The process needs to be checked out to the user. So you right click on your process tree. I'm going to check out the routing to me, where I take ownership of the process data. So we're going to get two people trying to edit it at the same time. If I click edit consumption, what that will give me the ability to do is unlock some of the fields inside this consumption grid. For instance, I can change quantity. I can change a reference designator, which is an identifier to a particular part. It becomes very useful when you're doing work instructions, or SOP images. We can also define which work step this particular part belongs. That can be done from inside of this consumption grid. In the future, in the near future, I should say, we are going to be unlocking the ability to fully map and edit consumption, all different fields and values right from this grid without having to go to other parts of the application. Once a user is satisfied, they can click the edit consumption button again, and that will lock the fields and write the process data to the database in the background. A few more of these buttons that I will move through are, we have the ability to hit home, so that relates to your 3D model and brings you back to its default view. You have different rendering capabilities. I have shaded with lines, but we also have a basic shaded, hidden line, and wireframe available to you. Zoom Fit will center the model inside of the 3D viewer. Get it so it's visible again for you. Then we come into different tool sets. We can do a zoom area. Now this works in conjunction with this point select. Point select is kind of like a default mode. There are no other tool sets invoked at this point. But we'll zoom area, so notice the change. And I'm going to zoom in on this module here in the upper left-hand corner. There we go. Okay. I can do an area select. Notice I went back to my default tool. I can select a particular region. Notice the plus sign, and it kind of serves as your target to serve as the focal point or center of your selection area. So these parts come together and are identified to be within the same subassembly. They are all selected at once, and I can go and hide those parts, for instance. So I went back to our default tool, point select, and I can work with the model just as is with the parts hidden. I showed you hide, and then show all is, works similarly, and I think that's self-explanatory. We can also highlight a part and change its particular color. So I have this pulley and subsequent belt highlighted, and I would like to maybe change those to red, which I just did, and they will stay red for the duration, of your session. We have many colors identified, but an administrator of our system can identify even more, including transparent. You could use as well. If I want to reset back to its native design color, I can do that. I would have to highlight the part, and I can hit reset on that particular part. As you can see, the color changes back to its designed color. Going on to the Views tab, there are some neat features here. So first I will start off with is defining a 3D view. Now this gives the user the ability to define a 3D view from which they can snap back to at a later session. So the for instance would be if I have a number of parts highlighted, colored, hidden, and shown, and that serves as an SOP or work instruction image for this particular activity, I can create that view. And if UCO comes through and it only changes one small part on that, then I can snap back to this particular view from which to start editing my work instruction image, for instance. So I don't have to recreate the whole scene. So creating a view is fairly simple. You can drop the Create View button down. You supply a name. Again, this has to be unique, I think, for obvious reasons to keep things segregated and identified. For your reference, it's optional. You can also define a description. When we click Save, then we can see that a view has been created. So to demonstrate this, if my model were like this, for instance, and I want to get back to that view, I can click that and snap back to right where I was. Other features that we have, obviously with a view highlighted, you can change some attributes on your 3D viewer and hit Update View. It will update that view. And subsequently, if you are done with that view or want to discard it, you can hit Remove View. That view will be removed from your workspace definition. So we have the ability to create snapshots, which can be used inside of our image editor. So the difference is I can do a screen capture of my 3D viewer, or I can go directly into the image editor or just as a general mode for this particular activity. We'll go with snapshot as I will be able to demonstrate both. So I am presented with a snapshot preview. I can do a quick edit of this preview. For instance, I want to get rid of some of this white space. If I click the quick edit button, I can do some basic editing such as cropping, saturation, brightness, and things of that nature here. When I'm satisfied, I can click done. It gives me a preview of what I've done. And again, here are those other features that I've talked about, right? And so you can perform some basic image editing here. Save brings it back to our preview. And when I'm satisfied with that, I have one of three choices that I can do with it, actually four. So I can save this as a snapshot, or I can save it as an SOP image. Now, the difference between these are a snapshot may be just a collection of images that you don't want to relate it at this particular time to a work step, but you'll know you'll need it in the future. So I can collect those. And now all of these images are saved on the activity we have highlighted in its documents section. So I can just collect these. And another way a person may want to use snapshots is you may want to take three different snapshots to combine them into one SOP image. If I was completely satisfied with this image, and I know that's going to be an SOP image, I can click Save, excuse me, Save as an SOP image, and it'll give me the option to even correlate it down to a work step right from here. To show you our image editor, I'm going to click Annotate Image. What this does is takes that snapshot and opens it up inside of our image editor. So some basic navigation, you have your tool set and menu items along the top. We have 3 tabs over here on the left. We have the snapshots I talked about, and we have previously created SOP images. On the Shapes tab, quite a few features, but I'm going to highlight some of the main ones here. Out of the box, we give you some previously defined definitions for some basic shapes and callouts and things of that nature. So I can drag a blank callout onto the canvas, and I can maybe put an identifier in there. I can also drag and drop auto ID callouts for this particular session. I can have text boxes, text box callouts, things of that nature. Now, notice when I talked about reference designators earlier, we automatically create callouts with those reference designators you defined during your consumption mapping process. So these are out of the box, provided to you by Proplanner. We also have the ability for an organization to create their own SOP annotations. Now, these are defined at administrator level, so not everybody in the organization can do it, but we do that out of a sense of control of that for your particular need and company. And so these are some basic examples of ones that are unique to this company in this demo environment that I have. We also give you the ability to create little icons or small images that are significant to defining your work instructions. Now, out of the box, you can see that we give our PPE icons, personal protective equipment, along with a few others, like a warning symbol. So these are actually images, small images, or icons that were defined. Just as the customer can define their own annotations, they can define their own call out or image icons as well. And also, there are many other shapes that the user can choose from to complete their work instruction image. I can also drag another snapshot onto this canvas, and I can place it and size it wherever I would like. And maybe I would like it down in that corner. Now, obviously, I'm just doing this for illustration purposes today to show you the features. Now, once I'm satisfied with this particular image, I also want to note that you can do your quick edit from here. I have highlighted this main image here, and you can do a select or edit the selected image, and that brings up that same quick edit screen that we saw earlier. Okay, I'll cancel out of that. Once I'm satisfied with the SOP image, I can save it. Now, notice that this SOP image, just like before, has been assigned to the activity document screen inside of that activity definition. Now, if a person makes an error and they want to go back and correct maybe something that they've done in the past, they will have that ability from the SOP images screen. Okay, let's try and find the one. I think this is the one I just worked on. They can hit edit diagram there. Now notice this is a very powerful feature. Two things are saved when I create an SOP image. One is a flattened 2D image to be shown on the actual work instruction report. The other is the definition file or this SOP or work instruction image. Okay, so that's saved in XML format. However, the important point is I can go back and edit all of the attributes in this. So for instance, if I did not want this warning symbol here, I can simply highlight it and delete it. Same thing with the callouts, right? So maybe I don't want that image on there, and maybe I don't want that call out. And let's say I want this to point to something rather than just into nothing. So I can do all of that editing, and I can hit save image. The important point of this is there's a vast amount of increased speed and efficiency for the engineer because you don't have to redefine the whole image in case of a part revision change, for instance. Also note that we can also assign this particular SOP image right to a work step as defined in our activity module work step tab. So right from here, you don't have to exit, to go to a different part of the application to assign it to the work step. Of course, the user can change all of the different attributes that they want about this particular call out. They can change the text from bold to not bold, the font types, font colors. Just by doing that, as they're accustomed to alignments, you can add other shapes such as additional connectors, some basic rectangle, ellipse, triangle shapes to it. There's also, you can work with containerizing certain objects that you drag and drop onto your working canvas. Another important point is you can import a picture from outside of Assembly Planner to be used inside of here. For instance, a person may want to show a piece of equipment or a fixture or some tooling. As I said, I can change different attributes about. I have an annotation selected. Maybe I want it red, and I can go ahead and just change those attributes. You can also change the thickness of the line. Now, this is all at a user level, and I will show in one moment how we can define these settings and these colors for an organization by an administrator. So a person wouldn't have to do this, each time if your company has a procedural requirement that defines the colors of shapes and text and things of that nature. But once I'm satisfied with all of that, I can go ahead and save the image. And it is then, saved back to the activity documents inside of Assembly Planner. Now, I talked about some admin features along the way. We have a built-in administration screen where the company can define their own shapes. So you can drag and drop various different shapes. You can add connectors. You can work with the font, the color and style and things of that nature. If you want some text inside of it, you can add that. You can provide a name and you can hit save. What that will do is make that particular annotation available to all users inside of your company. You can also add those little image shapes or icons that I was talking about. Again, once you can do this if you have a particular need for your organization. You can also manage your custom annotations. If you're done using them, you can select some or all of them, and there is a delete the selected feature here, and it'll remove them from the Assembly Planner application. The last point I wanted to show on this is that you can set your default colors for like lines, uh, line thickness, the fill of the shape, the font color, and hit save. Now, once we do that, all users will see those attributes being applied to those out of the box annotations and ones that have been defined. So instead of having the light blue line color and font color that I was showing, those will be changed to whatever is defined by the administrator. That serves as an overview of our image editor. So it adds quite a bit more features on the one in the past. So to move along from our tools screen, we have the ability where we can perform a lot of different options. We can work with transformation or the moving of particular parts. So I'm going to attempt to highlight a part here. I'm going to engage the transform tool, and double clicking on it allows me to move that particular part to a new location. Obviously, I can do this for many different parts, and they will stay moved, so I can capture views or images or those other tools that I've been showing you. Restore all is just as it implies, it moves them back to their default locations. We also have the ability to add cutting planes, or as some people refer to them as cutting sections, on the 3D viewer. So we can have different, we can have the X, Y, and Z axis, and we can also toggle their visibility. A little demonstration of that is the default is the Y. So you can see I can move this in and out. Now I can have X, Y, and Z all available to me at the same time. What I meant by toggle their visibility is I can uncheck this particular box and I can capture the image without that cutting plane being visible. Once I'm done with cutting planes, I can go back to my default tool. We have a new feature that we're working with called a magnifier callout. This will give you a zoom lens of a place on your 3D model that you may want to represent or call attention to. So how the magnifier callout works is once it's invoked, I get a zoom lens and I can pick the target from which I want to emphasize. So let's say I want to emphasize that location. I am clicking, I'm holding down my left mouse button, and I can create a zoom callout. I can do this any number of times. So once I am satisfied and I click on my 3D viewer, I can go ahead and click more. Now, interesting and important to note is that I can set at a user level or session level the zoom percentage of that. So I'm going to exaggerate it for illustration purposes, and the actual lens size. Okay. So once I come back, you can already see that that has changed, right? So I can, again, provide any number of these zoom lenses on here. Now, let's say I want to take a snapshot of that, I can hit point select to disengage the tool while leaving the zoom callouts or magnifier callouts visible on my screen, and I can go ahead and grab a snapshot, this particular view. These values of zoom percentage and lens size can be defined by an administrator as a default for the virtual build module as well. I can also clear all the magnifier callouts right from here. We have the capability to add measurement lines. The default is a point-to-point measurement. So when that's invoked, I can click 2 points on my 3D canvas and I can provide a measurement. Now, the measurement unit or the unit of measure comes up as the default in which the CAD model was designed. In this particular case, the default was meters. Now, when we open up a workspace, there are different ways to open up a workspace, which was not demonstrated. But just to add to the point right here, opening up a workspace in different methods allows different types of measurements. So we have point to point as the default, but it also has feature to feature, radiuses, and things of that nature. You'll see in a second how a user can also set different attributes of that measurement line that was just provided. Going back to my default tool. From the settings tab, we have many different settings the user can set for their session, 3D viewer background colors, whether they want the 3D viewer to have a gradient effect to it. So if I invoke that like that, I'll give you an idea what that meant. The transparency level. So if I want a part to be transparent, you notice there was a color selection of transparent. I can set the opacity percentage and what its base color would be. I can hit apply, and that would apply to all parts that were set as transparent for this session. Measurement settings. Now, I mentioned a moment ago, I can change some attributes about the measurement lines. So you can see font and line colors and things of that nature displayed on my screen. And once we hit the apply button, just as in transparency setting, there's an apply button, here's an apply button. And any of those features on your 3D viewer will be changed to that preference. If a user closed some panels, in this case, I'm going to close the consumption grid, but they wanted it to come back, the panel visibility drop down allows you to turn the different panels on and off. So we will bring it back. In this case, now we can see our consumption grid is displayed again. Now we can toggle the axis and navigation cube on the screen. This is the axis down in this corner, navigation cube here. We can toggle those on and off. At an administrator level, this is where some of the other defaults can be set. So I talked about some for the image editor. Now I'll talk about some for this 3D viewer. So an administrator can set the default background color, right, for the 3D viewer, whether you use gradient or not. Or if an administrator can also add a different custom color to those color selections. For instance, that I showed you when wanting to highlight and change the color of a part. There is a default image size. So that was inside of the image editor, what we want that particular workspace or working area to be. Typically, we want it to match our SOP or work instruction reports. This is set to the default report for Assembly Planner, but if we have a unique circumstance, it does give us the ability to fit it, to that display area on the report. Administrator can set the defaults here for magnifier callouts for zoom factor and that lens size. And once we hit save, all of these defaults then will be applied to all users of Assembly Planner in your organization when they restart log back in to Assembly Planner. So that covers all the features that we have inside this virtual build module, but there are a few more things I'd like to show quickly. are the different modes in which this application can run. We have been in default mode. There is also a mode called virtual build mode. Now going into this, this will allow the user to step down their process and virtually see the consumption that is mapped to that particular activity. Now, note that it is in combination of the parts that were applied to the previous process. So as I come down, we can see our assembly being virtually assembled on the 3D viewer. So the reason that this is crossed off is because there was no consumption map to that particular activity. For instance, it may be a labor only type of activity and there are no parts to install. To help a person with work instruction creation, we've added a feature in this mode called Edit the Included Activities. So, for instance, let's say I want to see all the parts up to this point in my process, except for maybe one of these activities. So I can go in and unselect that particular activity, and then I can update the 3D viewer accordingly. So it took off the parts for that activity. And it also indicates to the user that those parts are not included. I'm going to turn them back on. Just to demonstrate, again, how that works. So anytime during the process, I can go into views. All of these tools that I've shown in the past are available. I can create views, I can create snapshots and things of that nature. Now, there are a lot of tools available from simply right-clicking on the 3D viewer or any place within inside of the virtual build module, depending on the area you're at. Right. So that is virtual build. Highlight mode, this is the next. It works very similar to virtual build in that it will show an accumulation of parts mapped to those activities to a given point, but it'll highlight the parts for this particular activity in red. All of the same features are available. For instance, I can edit those included activities again. All of the tools are available. All right. The last mode I want to show you about is instance mapping mode. It is an optional mode available to the users, but the main intent of instance mapping mode is to identify a particular instance of a component as it relates to a consumption mapped to that activity. So think of it like this. I have a very small assembly shown, but we'll talk hypothetical for a moment. In the essence of a vehicle, I may have 5,000 of a particular bolt that's used. But I may want to talk about, for virtual build and identification purposes, which of those 5,000 am I talking about at this particular activity. Now, nuts and bolts may be a poor example, but think of it when you have similar subassemblies. Think of a vehicle with headlight subassemblies. We more than likely will have at least two of the same subassembly, one for left, one for right. So we may want to identify which instance in a model. Now, I have to emphasize this is purely optional to add further definition, inside of your process. It's not mandatory for virtual build to work. But to demonstrate how this operates, I'm going to highlight this particular bolt. Now we can see we need 4 of them. So we can, when I do that, it will give me my candidates. You can see that the unmapped instances of that bolt are highlighted in an orange color. I can click on one, You can see the indicator changed here, right? So I have one identified for mapping, and I want to do those three. Now, when I'm satisfied with the selections, because there may be another instance off somewhere else, I'm satisfied with this work so far, I can commit that work. Now, notice here, I can also have chosen to cancel, that particular mapping. So if I highlight that indicator bar, you can see that I have 3 of the 4 maps. So there's another instance I would want to identify. So that's how that works. Excuse me. It allows you to get down to a more granular level of definition for your particular process needs. We go back into default mode. I just don't want to underestimate a lot of the features inside of this model tree. I'm in the CAD model tree. When I highlight a part here, I can do I can isolate a particular part. Let's see, let's pick something that's going to stand out. So I can highlight that. Notice that the part highlighted on the 3D viewer as well, and I can isolate that particular part. So I can work with that, right? And so I can show all again. And I can do the zoom fit. Now, highlighting the part, I can also just zoom to it too. So without isolating it, I can bring that into my center of focus too. And this lists out all, of the parts and their at the appropriate levels as defined in the CAD model, right? So we have a subassembly here with some children and so on and so forth. So I'm back in default mode and I will do a zoom fit. So that concludes the introduction to our new virtual build 3D capabilities inside of Assembly Planner. New offering we're very excited about. And again, my name is Todd Bodeslaw. I'm with Proplanner Inc. And I would be happy to take any questions you would like to forward to me via our website. So thank you for watching the presentation today and take care. We look forward to helping you with your process needs.